Ege drolor zambe zeparche, palden lame shabla solvade. Oma Guru Vajradara Sumati Munisha Sanekar Utta Vardanya Shri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Hum Oma Guru Vajradara Sumati Munisha Utta Vardanya Shri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Oma Guru Vajradara Sumati Muni Shasane Kar Utta Vardani Shri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Hum Oma Guru Vajradara Sumati Muni Utta Vardani Shri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Pakyuke kudan dagi lu, pakyuke sundan dagi nga, pakyuke tukdan dagi yi, ten yerme çıktı çingi lu, makyuke kudan dagi lu, makyuke sundan dagi nga, Makyuke tukdan dageyi ten yerme çıktı çingi lo. Om Muni Muni Mahamuni Shakya Shibuki Choshimeto Tramare Rabalingashin Nide Gempadi Sange Shinto Mikte Ulvarki Drokunam Dashingla Parasho Yidamang Guru Ratna Mandrala Kam Niryata Yami Sangye Chedan Tsoge Chonamla Chancho Pardo Dani Kyapsuchi Dagi Jinso Gibe Sonam Ki Drola Pinchira Sangye Druparasho Sangye Chedan Tsoge Chonam La Chancho Pardo Dani Kyapsuchi Dagi Jinso Gibe Sonam Ki Drola Pinchira Sangye Druparasho Sangye Chedan Tsoge Chonam La Chancho Pardo Dani Kyapsuchi Dagi Jinso Gibe Son Pinchira Sangye Druparasho.
In the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, I take refuge until enlightenment. With the practice of generosity and the other perfections, may I obtain Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings.
Amoya Haye Keda Ludana Jinke Rubundana Mike Namdan Ruakunke Dranam Chitsampa Tamche Ketu Dagi Cheten.
Often, when when we don't know where we're going or what will happen, when we don't have a clear idea about that, that generates anxiety and fear within us. And from this point of view, it's important to have some kind of idea of what is waiting for us after death, even if on a very personal level, it's something that I've not really worried about. Even while studying, etc., I never really deepened this aspect because for me, dying well was is the most important, and everything else will follow. So I've never thought too much about how what bardo is like and all the aspects. For me, it's never been particularly attractive, let's say, like interesting to deepen this understanding. But I think we should all have a general idea of what happens and what it's like. This is according to different world views. We will have different will different um, ideas. So within the Buddhist tradition, there's a text called Abhidharma Kosha. It's a type of teaching from Buddha where how the bardo beings are described and the bardo itself and the process of rebirth. So we'll look at this now. What is a bardo, first of all? It's a Tibetan word, bardo. It's interesting. There are certain times that Tibetan words that we translate when there really aren't any words to translate it, creating a lot of incomprehension. On the other side, there are other words that we could translate, and then we keep them with their Tibetan terms that seem a little bit more mystical. Bardo it just means intermediate state. What happens is the interval. We could even translate it as an intermediate state, an interval, what's in between two things. That's the bardo. For example, nejun is an extremely important term. It's translated badly as renunciation. Maybe a little bit better. The the certainty to be able to emerge, a definite emergence, but we don't really have a term, or dikpa and sonam in Tibetan, papam and punya in Sanskrit, translated as negative karma and merits. So we don't even have the terms to translate these things. So sometimes it's interesting. Sometimes we maintain the original Tibetan or Sanskrit term when there is an appropriate term, and the opposite happens too. In this specific case, bardo actually It's something that we could translate. It means intermediate state. It's the interval. And this intermediate state is particularly important because the in-between state between two things, the bardo, is when a cycle ends and we're waiting to begin a new cycle. And it's particularly important because it's said that during our lifetime, our lifetime is like a great ship, and it's said in relation to the bardo that even between two different situations, one cycle, two cycles, so during our life, we're like a big ship, and this big ship to change course, how difficult is it? Imagine a transatlantic. Before changing course, little by little, needs to turn until they can go into the opposite direction. When we're in the bardo, it's like being in a small kayak. I mean, just one small movement and you can change direction. This is because when we're in a cycle, until that cycle concludes, we're not able to begin something else. So there's the effort to conclude that cycle, transform it. But when we're between two things, we just need to choose a new direction and we go there. And then you need to see if there are the right conditions to provide for a new positive rebirth, for example. But for example, I have a job for many years. I have a contract. I have an identity. There's a state. There's a level of comfort with the work that I'm doing, etc. At a certain point, I want to change my job. But as I still have that job and I don't have time to look for another job or mental space to look for something else, and then I have a contract and other commitments that don't allow me to have the space. But then at a certain point, that job ends, let's say, and then I have space to imagine something else. Once that job is finished and I don't have a new job yet, that allows me to imagine and to choose, maybe to quit working altogether, go back to university. I can do an infinite number of things. I don't have the obligation to repeat that thing. A whole world opens up. This moment where the world opens up is called bardo. This is something positive, but for various reasons, it's been transmitted that this idea that bardo is something negative has been shared. Instead, I don't think so. We finish something, good or bad, and then we open up new possibilities for something else. Once we're born in this body, we need to grow up in this body, get old in this body, and die in this body. Once this body is over, then an infinite number of possibilities open up, where to be reborn, how to be reborn. It's true that for us, the idea that there are many possibilities doesn't give us much serenity. We feel like we need more security. Often, in this bardo state, then one can generate frustration. One reason is because the cycle is over, but one hasn't accepted that it's over. I keep living as if should have continued, and I stay trapped in what was. And if I had done this, it wouldn't have gone like that, etc. I think we know this dynamic quite well. So when a cycle ends, the only way to open up a new one and allow that first one to be end, and this is why the death of anything needs to be lived well. When one dies well, then one enters into a bardo that is serenely. Let's give the example of a couple. When two people are together, it can happen that the relationship at a certain point is um, ends. And when a couple ends that relationship well, that gives the space for both of them to begin a new relationship well. And instead, when a relationship ends badly, one of the two doesn't accept that the relationship is over and never opens up himself for a new relationship. A new relationship would be unfair, let's say, or maybe one is open up for a new relationship, but one projects one's fears related to the previous relationship. So I don't open myself up really in a new relationship. Because I'm afraid to open up for a new reality. I'm trapped into what happened before because it ended badly. For this reason, bardo actually is conditioned by our death. When something ends well, it allows that moment of breath where one can look towards the future with serenity. When it ends badly, one ends up trapped in that and can't look towards the future with serenity. When a death doesn't conclude something well, then one needs to use the period of dharma, of a bardo, to end well that cycle. So there is still that possibility in this intermediate state. When something ends, and if that bardo is intermediate state is too short, what happens is one ends one reality, starts a new one, and in that new reality, one projects all of the past one, and just ends up repeating those same dynamics, as happens at work or in all sorts of situations. So these intermediate states are fundamental, even between one day and the next. The bardo is in the night's sleep. We have a habit of saying, tomorrow is a new day, because even if a day can be difficult, when one spends a good night's sleep, often one starts the new day with a different kind of energy. So these intermediate states, what happens between one reality and the next, between one cycle and the next, between one lifetime and another, these are very important. Now this is the concept of bardo, generally speaking. And let's remember that bardos are fundamental. Let me just give you one more example. I'm talking to someone. I stop talking to that person, and before starting a new conversation with someone else, it would be good to have a short bardo, a moment where I breathe and say, okay, this moment has passed, and I open up myself to something new. If I don't do this bardo experience well, it could happen that the emotions from the first encounter get projected onto the second. as can happen, is a classic example that someone is nervous from work and gets home and just dumps all of this anxiety on those at home. I had a friend, for example, at monastery who had a very so, so I had a friend who had a very stressful job and was realizing that when he got home, he was really just destroying his family life. So what he did, he created a kind of bardo. He would get home, park his car, and he wouldn't get out of the car until he was sure that he left work behind. Sometimes it took hours because he didn't want to bring those tensions home. So with awareness, he created some kind of space, a buffer zone, this intermediate state where he could leave behind what was and go forward with a new energy. So let's try to apply this concept to our life in general. Some people, for example, take a year's sabbatical. The idea is, I've ended something, let me take time so that I can then have a fresh outlook. So let's look now at bardo, understood as the period in between death and rebirth. To understand bardo, and here I repeat, in this context, we mean this interval between one life and another. The best way is to start observing what happens during one's dreams. When one falls asleep, the process of dreaming is very, very, very similar. I don't mean exactly the same, but it's very similar. The order is the same to the process of death. So we have the earth into water, water into fire, fire into wind, wind into consciousness, white, red, and black visions, and then clear light. When one gets to the conclusion, the end of gross death, and when all the winds dissolve, that's when we can say that the person starts to really sleep. Something that I never studied, but someone talked to me about the dreaming. I mean, is it all the same, or are there different levels of dreaming? Does one start dreaming right away, or only after one has or one has reached a certain level of sleep, some kind of REM? I don't remember exactly how it is, but when the dissolution of the winds are finished, then one is actually sleeping. That first level, then it's like a subtle death of sleep. And just before being able to dream, that's when that's what we call the clear light of the dreaming, or of sleep, the clear light of sleep. There we have the black near attainment of the sleep, because one in death, all the elements dissolve. So earth into water, water into fire, fire into wind, wind into consciousness, white, red, and black vision, and then clear light. And then when after death, in the bardo, one does the opposite. From the clear light, one needs to have the black vision, and then from the black near attainment, it's the red increase, and then the white vision, and then this consciousness, wind, fire, water, and earth. It's the opposite process. So during sleep, one falls asleep, and at a certain point, one wakes up in a dream. Why do we say one wakes up in a dream? Because when one falls asleep, all senses fall shut down. One loses contact with the present, the past, and the future, and the five senses. The mind becomes little by little foggy. One doesn't understand things well. It all dissolves until one gets to a deep sense of a deep dissolution of sleep, and then in the dream one comes back into contact with the senses. One can walk, one can think, one can see, one can smell. That reality of the dream is it something that happens gradually, in the sense I dream that let's say I dream I'm in Indonesia. I wake up in that dream. I'm a small child in Indonesia that I need to grow up, or maybe I just dream that it's something that just arises immediately. Maybe I'm 100 years old. So in a dream, in an instant, the entire reality arises. We live that reality, and during the dream, normally, most cases, we're not aware of dreaming. So that reality that's created by ourselves, we live it as something real. So if I see a monster chasing me, I'm afraid. If I'm sitting in a beautiful place, I feel attraction. I live those emotions and sensations. In one night, how many dreams can we have? One, more than one? More than 10? Fewer than 10? In my opinion, I think they can have up to 7 dreams. In my memory, maximum 3 or 4. I don't remember ever having many dreams in one night, but it does happen that we can have more than one dream in a night, and some can be connected to each other. Sometimes I always have very strange dreams. Things you need tremendous fantasy. And I remember situations, it was actually like one dream, but it almost felt like more than one dream, like different consciousness. So when we have more than one dream, it's like one just gets turned off, and then another one arises, and we're in a completely different reality, and we can dream totally different things. And then at a certain point, we wake up. Very often, we're dreaming, and from the dream, we wake up. Similarly to this, it's said that when we die, we get the earth dissolves into water, water into fire, fire into wind, wind into the space of consciousness, and the coarse body has lost all the strength, and the gross mind as well. So then all the winds dissolve. We have white, red, and black vision, and then the clear light appears when the very subtle body and mind becomes self-evident, self-conscious. At a certain point, that indestructible drop opens. Once it opens, and when we enter into the clear light, the very subtle consciousness comes out of our body, starting from our heart, can come out of the body in different parts. Here there are many descriptions, and it can come out of our mouth, out of the nose, out of the ears, the lower parts of the body, from the forehead, from the hands, from the feet. There's a whole description that says if it comes from this part of the body, then it'll be this type of rebirth. It's it's a way of seeing things that are quite deterministic. But if we go to look deeper, we see that it's not like that. Why? Because when the consciousness gets out from clear light, it goes again, we go again into the black near attainment, that self-conscious, um, um, the very subtle mind and body become self-evident, and then another time it just everything turns off. When everything gets turned off, that's when one enters into the bardo. One enters into that intermediate state when the clear light is turned off and one gets into this pure darkness. And this is called the black near attainment of bardo, or the rebirth in the bardo. So the first rebirth is in the bardo. It's called bardo because it's the intermediate state between two states with a physical body. But it is actually a rebirth. What happens is, the clear light, the black light the black vision comes again, and then we have a red increase and the white vision, and then the 80 natural mental aspects come back, and then we have a body again, and then we in the opposite order, but on a more subtle level, because the bardo body is called a yi lu, a body of the mind. So a mental body, it's a body of energy. It's not physical, and it's described as being very similar to a body of a dream, because he who's dreaming, his perception, there's a body. One can experience many different things, and that body, I mean, we don't have a material reference of that body. Similarly, in the bardo, what exists on a physical level is a very subtle body, but the experience, one wakes up into a full reality like a dream, and that's the mental body. It's not physical, but it's perceived as a body, when instead it's not an actual physical material body. There are senses, and you mean during one's dream there are senses, right? We can see and hear and touch. There are dreams where we can even have smells, or even taste, which is more rare but possible. So a bardo being has mostly the eyesight, the hearing, and the taste. But what he hears, even though it feels like one is actually hearing, but it's a communication from mind to mind. One feels the feelings of another being, not the sounds. And it's said it's like this for all beings that don't have a physical body. So the bardo beings is born in this reality that is a fruit of his own mind, actually. Like, let's imagine that bardo is like being reborn in a dream, and the dream can be marvelous or it can be a nightmare. And here, there's a very delicate argument here as to whether the hells exist or not. Once I heard a story that really touched me deeply. It was a girl, was a friend of a friend in the United States, very young, during a chemistry lesson in the lab in high school. There was an accident. She caught fire and she was badly burned. She was taken to the hospital, put in a pharmacological coma, and she spent something like 10 days in the coma. At a certain point, she woke up from the coma. And when she woke up from the coma, she was extremely afraid. She was in total shock. And when she's able to communicate finally, she says that in that period, her subjective experience while in the coma was like waking up in a nightmare where she was being raped and then burned, and then it wouldn't end, and then she would be raped again and then burned again, innumerable times, again and again. And in the descriptions of the hell realms, there is something called the reoccurring hells, where an extreme state of suffering reoccurs, and there's not even death. It just goes on and on and on. When I heard this story, I asked myself, I mean, this girl, during these 10 days of coma, for her, did they feel like 10 days, or was it much longer for her, or shorter? In my opinion, I think they probably felt much longer, because one lives a strong suffering. The time is longer. If I am very afraid of something, when strong violence ends, and before it starts again, that moment is infinite. So even if she was in the hospital protected and safe, the suffering that she felt was real, or was real. It was real. So we can say that she experienced a hell realm. Shantideva in the Bodhisattva Charavatara describes the hells that are created in our own minds. The concept of hells, it's like being reborn in a nightmare that one can't get out of, and time is so relative. And then there are physical realities that are infernal situations that exist, very strong sufferings that exist. So a bardo can be something very beautiful, or something very tiresome. If one doesn't take rebirth in a physical body, there's a maximum amount of time. It's said that the bardo being has no perception of day and night. So when one day ends, which corresponds to 7 of our days, if the bardo being hasn't taken a new rebirth, then there's a quick death, and where there's a very fast death, and then takes another rebirth. At a certain point, poof, there's a new bardo begins. That's why when someone dies, we have this tendency to make prayers right away when that person's dead, and then every 7 days for 7 weeks, because it's said that the maximum amount of time that a being can remain in the bardo is 1 week, or 7 weeks for us. Why do we focus on the prayers every 7 days? Because every death is an opportunity. There's a possibility to change. Another detail, it's said that the bardo being takes the form of his or her possible rebirth. So if I'm going to be born as a human being, then in the bardo I see myself as a human being. If I'm going to be reborn as a giraffe or a cow or any other being, I see myself as that being. So during the bardo, the form that one experiences one's existence in the bardo, as one sees oneself, corresponds to the type of rebirth that one is probably going to have. It's not. It doesn't have to be like that, but um, but if the conditions aren't right, then a rebirth is not taken. There's a small death, and that there's a small death that then determines the next bardo. Bardo actually can be a very positive experience, and there are many people, many beings who were able to have great spiritual realizations in the bardo. We talk about those who have reached enlightenment in the bardo. For example, it's a state, it's not necessarily negative. This process of a small death within the bardo and the rebirth of a new bardo can happen maximum 7 times. The the last time one has to take a rebirth. It can't stay in the bardo for an infinite amount of time. A bit like after when one dreams, one can go from one dream to the next, but at a certain point you have to wake up. As I said, that we make prayers in the bardo because when we have a strong connection with someone, if we're able to generate a thought, interact with the bardo being with something positive and virtuous, it's said that during the bardo, you just need one small virtuous mind to invert your direction and take a positive direction. Like being in a kayak, you just need one small movement to make a big change. So it's really important during our life to create deep connections with holy places, because bardo beings, as soon as they think of a place, they find themselves in that place. This transportation from one place to another is immediate. One says, oh, wonderful. You think about that place and you're there. But imagine if you're not able to control your mind. It's quite chaotic. Oh, how nice. We're here together. And then I thought, oh, no, you're not there anymore. So it's a characteristic, and it depends on how it's lived. But it's said that if during the bardo, if we have an imprint of a holy place, that remembering that holy place, that can bring us there, and then having contact with that holy place can be the condition that brings us to a better rebirth. So it's important to create strong and deep connections with places that bring well-being and peace. When we make prayers, if we have a special connection with someone, beyond the language and the religion and the words we use, we generate virtuous, positive feelings towards the one who's in the bardo. And in the bardo, it's from mind to mind. And so in that moment, we can perceive, we can feel, and by doing that, what happens is, if the other being is able to feel what we are feeling, that helps give a good direction to that being for a better rebirth. A little bit similar as it's described. I think they closed the door manually. If somebody can open it. Okay, so manually you can open the door too. Okay. So a bardo being wouldn't have that problem, because It's said that a bardo being, one characteristic of a bardo being is not having a physical body. So nothing physical is an obstruction. One can go through walls or mountains. There are no physical obstructions because he doesn't have a physical body. The only obstruction that can block him or her is the moment of conception of his next life, which we'll get to. So the bardo being has this ability to move from one place to another in a split second. There's nothing that obstructs him or her. And prayers are important because that allows for him or her to connect to a positive thought. A similar example, it's not exactly the same or precise, but it helps understand. It said that in a previous life of Buddha, or Buddha was in the hell realm. And it's one of the examples to show that even in the hell, it's possible to generate the basis of bodhicitta. So it said that he was in a hell realm and he was, he needed to pull a kind um, of carousel, like a chariot, and there was someone who of the hell realm who was beating him, and there was someone else who was really having a hard time pulling the cart, having a hard time pulling the cart, had and he sees that he's being heavily beaten. And the Buddha says, "No, no, no! I'll pull his cart." And so he has a moment of compassion for him. And then the Lord of the hell realm took a big hammer and just basically killed him. It said that one needs just one a split moment of compassion to get out of compassion, and it, and that condition of getting out of the of the of the of the of the hell realm in the bardo was the actual hammer to the head. So it's said that coming into contact with something positive like love or gratitude or faith or virtuous, that allows for that bardo to end and a new better bardo to start. So every 7 days, theoretically, it's not so mathematical, there's this small death. It's when we need to really connect with the being within the bardo to have a better rebirth. So these are some characteristics related to bardo. One name given to bardo beings. It's quite curious for us. They're called trisa. Tri means smell, and sa means the smell eaters. They nourish themselves with smell. It's said that what they're able that the smells are prevalent and they nourish themselves. There's a practice in Tibetan called sur, where one burns a specific type of incense with substances inside. It's an act of generosity to nourish the bardo beings. Because it's said that these beings nourish themselves with these fragrances, these smells. So even during the bardo, if we want to simplify, it doesn't have to be Tibetan incense, but what is burned during this practice is Tibetan incense. Tibetans eat butter and tsampa, not so much anymore, but they used to. So they burn. You grind the tsampa, and there are other substances that you can burn together with the butter. So an Italian in a bardo, so we would burn pizza or pasta spaghetti. We can make pizza incense, coffee. There are many wonderful things that we can offer, but the point is that shows us that when there's a good smell of food, we we can offer that to the bardo beings. It's a way to practice generosity, to nourish these beings and help them. So when if what does it cost us? You know, if we're cooking, as it smells delicious, we offer that. So we train ourselves in the act of giving, and then we're able also to help sustain, to support these beings. And it says that also that beings that don't have a physical body and communicate mind to mind, they nourish themselves with smells, but only if they've been offered to them. So, because if it's not offered to them, it's as if they're stealing. So, it's really important to offer those smells. So, this is something. This specific practice is called sur. This comes also. It's a way also to create harmony among these beings. Even when Tibetan incenses are made, the incenses that we have, that we make in Nepal, one specific characteristic is that in the composition of the incense, there are many substances that are not there because they're pleasurable for us, but because it's said that they are the substances that are pleasant to many other types of beings. Because that, and it's said that that creates harmony among these beings. And the logic is, if they're satisfied, then they'll create the conditions for us to find harmonious situations. So also color, for example, for the hell beings, a bardo for someone who might be reborn in the hell realm, it's like the color of something burned, and the hungry ghost is something is like clear water. The animal realm, they see a color that is like a gray smoke, and human beings see yellow, if I remember correctly, and the god realms, they see white. So one description, one reason to learn this is that it's said that if one knows these colors, if one knows these colors and sees one of these colors in the bardo, then one can be careful. If one sees one of these negative colors, then one tries to invert the process. I personally think that it would be hard to be that aware. But one other curiosity is, it's possible to be reborn as a spirit. So it's no longer a bardo. It's an actual rebirth, but in the form of the previous body. And this happens when one dies with a very, very strong feeling, a strong hatred, a strong attachment. There was one case, for example, this happened in the family, someone who had built a house, beautiful. It was incredibly attached to this house, and as soon as the house was built, he died. And even the sickness, it was all very quick. And in that moment, that person died years later. Many people, one of the children, the daughter, the sees that person. It was my grandfather, this beautiful, beautiful house in the mountains, and my sister would play with these. I mean, never knew him. He died when my mother was 19, so I never met him. But my sister played with him, and one of my aunties, different people in the house, they said that they felt that different feelings in that house. And my mother taking care of Rinpoche who came to visit. So there was a kind of retreat that the Rinpoche was there, and they were going to do it in this family house, retreat house in the mountains. So Rinpoche gave the first teachings in that place, and it said after that trip, he said, we need to, there's something that needs to be fixed. And after that, no one ever felt his presence anymore. So Rinpoche knew how to free him from that state. Many stories like this happened in my own family. So when someone dies, one can be reborn in it is in like in a physical aspect similar to the previous life. It's not a bardo being. This theoretically happens when someone dies, where one had an enormous attachment towards life, or enormous anger or attachment, or if someone just dies suddenly, it can happen. It's a strong fear that can create a situation where the being cannot disassociate himself from the previous life, and it's a conflicting. There's a conflicting feeling. There was a movie that described this. It was called The Others. It really describes this state excellently. The person who died doesn't have the awareness of being dead. This could happen, and this is said it's not normal. This would be when the person who dies who died too quickly, was extremely afraid. And it's one possibility that this can happen. Or if one dies with an extremely strong emotional link, attachment, desire, hatred, anger towards something, towards a place, this can happen. This lack of disassociation with awareness of being dead. When someone dies, it's a precious moment, because when the person enters in the bardo, when someone dies, the one who's on the other side, we who are still alive, for us, it's a precious moment towards that person. There's that moment of mind to mind. So when a spiritual guide, when one's guru, someone with a high realization dies, that's one of the most important moments for a disciple to receive the blessings of the guru, because there are no more limitations of the human body, and naturally there's the possibility of a different level of exchange. So when someone who, like our spiritual guide, leaves his or her body, it's a very special moment to ask for blessings, meditate on Guru Yoga. It's a very, very important moment. For example, when Lama Ganchen Rinpoche left his body, I lived it myself, but many other people said the same thing. Geshe Kuncho Gyatsen felt his presence very, very closely. Geshe Kuncho Gyatsen said to me, I saw many masters many great masters who have left their body, but it's the first time that I have the feeling of someone who after leaving the body, this person's presence became even stronger than when he was alive. Many people had this similar experience. Just a detail, when someone dies, there are some signs to help us understand if that person died well or not. For me, one of the most important signs, and then if you died well or not, if someone is well in the bardo or not, is this feeling that one can have of the energy that one the energy that one the energy that one feels in the place where the being died. I've I've felt, for example, places where people have died, you could just cut the tension and negativity with a knife, and if it's like this, you need many pujas to do where you can transform the energy, and then there there instead there sometimes where if a being died and in that place there's a great feeling of peace. For example, our friend Teresa Torriquia, who passed away, those of you who knew her, you certainly remember her. She had just some anecdotes of the center. She was really a character. She was someone who lived here at the center. She had met Lama Ganshin many years before. She was a little different. She was special. All even before Albagnano existed, even though she had an apartment in Milan, she used to sleep at the center, even not sleeping. Those of you who are a little older, those of you older, and you remember the beginning of TV in Italy, and then there was kind of an interval between between programs. There's this interval of harp playing. Well, that was her playing the harp. Even in self-healing, when we have the melody, Oma Guru Vajradhara, she was the one who adapted the mantra to that melody. So that was just to talk about, to remember her a little bit. She was kleptomaniac. Um, she was she was very, she had many peculiar characteristics. She talked non-stop, and once there was an oracle, and it was a difficult moment, and I said, please give a special blessing, and he looked at her, and then he looked at me in the eyes, and he said, take good care of her because she takes away interferences. And then, so on a gross level, it was absolutely true, because if there was something that didn't go well, it was Teresa's fault. If something was missing, Teresa took it. It's true. Sometimes we would raid her house just to get back all the umbrellas and the lighters and the sweaters. I remember once we were doing the tattoo wall, the cups. Luca, one guy, is a young guy. He was doing this job. He had an AC/DC T-shirt. At a certain point, his T-shirt disappears. A few days ago, Teresa arrived with an AC/DC shirt. Anyway, many episodes of Teresa. Anyway, the point is, the day that Teresa died, the day she died, the first sign that we had, the whole ceiling of the Gompa fell down. All the mandalas who that were up at the time, they all fell down. The technical reason is that it was done badly. They put in screws that couldn't hold the ceiling, but it happened the night that she died. It was the night of the 6th July, the night before the 7th of July. So just before her death, and then after, in her room there was a beautiful, beautiful energy. It was serene. It was pleasant to be there. That was my experience, my memory. This is a sign of someone who dies well. Generally speaking, one way to perceive this, it's important for us to understand this because it can happen that someone close to us dies, and how do we know if we should be worried or not worried, what we should be doing? If in that place there's the if there's a harmonious energy, a peaceful, pleasurable energy, that's a sign that we shouldn't worry. Instead, if there's a heavy energy, at that point, more than worry, we should get to work to connect with that person and invert that energy and create positive energy. Other curiosities related to the bardo. What do we do with the body once someone dies? At the time of death, ideally, it's good not to touch on the body because from the coarser death to the subtle death takes time. So if that person is in a deep state of meditation, then of course we don't touch the body. Otherwise, it's not that important. But we can see when someone is in the death process, there's still a luster in the complexion. And then at a certain point, that complexion changes, and there you can see that the death process has finished. But until it's completely finished, then it's quite tepid around the heart. But once the whole body is totally cold and is not smelling good and decomposing, then of course the death process has ended. What should we do with the body? Cremate, bury? According to Buddhist tradition, it doesn't really matter. Lama Ganshin said to me once that the body comes from the elements and goes back to the elements. So if it goes to water or to wind or to fire, it doesn't really matter. Personally, my body, when I die, whoever's there, you do what you want. In the sense that it's not me anymore. It doesn't matter. On a practical level, cremation is quite convenient here. In Tibet, it was much harder, and also burial was very difficult. So in Tibet, there was this at death to help the person create more positive karma. It seems horrible for our culture, but they would give the body to be eaten by the vultures. It's because it's an act of generosity. It's a way, that body is no longer that person. By giving the body, it generates positive energy for that person to give food for those who are hungry. Often in our culture, we identify the person with his body, But in Tibetan culture, the body is no longer that person. It is not that person anymore. So if that body can generate something positive for other beings, good. And here we come to the question of organ donation. By donating an organ, what happens is, if a person, this is my view on the topic, if someone has prepared himself to 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 die with awareness and meditate on clear light, it's better to not donate the organs, because organ donation comes before the subtle death has ended. It speeds up the death process. So someone who has prepared himself his entire life to meditate on clear light, it's better to not give the organs. Everyone else, it's wonderful, because if I want to donate my organs with awareness, and my body can really help others and save their lives, that's going to generate a tremendous amount of positive energy even after my death. Is that clear? So these are some points to clarify. Traditionally, after the cremation, the ashes are part of that person's body. So a practice is done to purify the ashes, and then those ashes can be used to nourish a tree, nature, something beautiful, or those ashes are mixed together with some clay or plaster. And Buddha and satsas and Buddha bas-reliefs are made. Why? This holy images. Why do we make holy images with the ashes of someone who's died? So that that because by using those images of those holy images as the basis to generate positive energy, the body, that person whose is the basis of that image, it still gets positive karma. So is there any specific question related to death process or the bardo? Bardo for someone who commits suicide is the same. Um, is the same bardo. What's the main difference? First of all, every case is a case in itself, and what determines the bardo is the state in which the person dies, and we can't generalize and have the certainty that everyone who commits suicides have a horrible bardo. It's not like that, but it's said that to take one's life, one needs to commit a very strong, violent action towards oneself. Then that's not a good emotional state to die in. And every case is different. But the problem is, by dying in like that creates a very, very deep imprint in that person's mind stream of wanting to take one's life. And then, as I said yesterday, it's said that it takes about 500 lives to, it's not, and then it's not exact, these 500 lifetimes. If someone in the next life is able to do everything positive to to invert that process, then it'll be shorter. But an animal an animal's bardo is the same. And a human being can be reborn as an animal. So a human being's bardo or an animal's bardo, it's determined. So someone who dies, we're animals, so it's different types of animals. So someone who's reborn as a mosquito, a cat, or a dog, what happens is that they have a, a, a mosquito sansara or a cat bardo or a human being bardo, but what it's determined not by who died, but the rebirth that's going to come. Is there another question?
Sì. Ok.
When someone is in bardo, he needs most of all something. We don't have a term for this. He needs positive energy, merits, and he needs to come into contact with virtuous states of mind, and 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 have clarity of where one wants to be reborn. So what we should do is generate positive energy dedicated to the one who's left his body. So that's why, generally speaking, when someone close to us dies, I try to identify 3 actions to do. The first 2 have to do with us, and the third has to do with us and the one who's died. The first one, we remember something wonderful of that by that person, and we thank that person for that. It's fundamental because very often when someone dies, we stay with the memories of of suffering and the sickness. But it's important for us to redefine the memories that we have of that person. So it's important to remember the good times and thank that person or that being. The second passage is to generate a positive wish for that being who's passed away, for that person. So that person, that being, wherever you are, what do I want for you? That allows us to connect with that being beyond his body, to we direct our love towards that being beyond his body. And the third point, we take a commitment, a concrete commitment to do something virtuous that's dedicated to that person, to that being who's passed away. This is like our sadness, which is natural that there's sadness. Let me just add a point that to when you think that you're ready for someone's death and you think that you're not going to have any reaction to that person's death, and that's just not possible. So being ready for someone's death is being serene, serene for that passage. But of course, there's sadness, there are emotions. It's not a problem if one cries, but we need to be careful to not become overwhelmed by that sadness, to not to keep ourselves from becoming overwhelmed. We so we use that strength of the sadness and we use that to do something positive dedicated to that person. What could we do positive for that person? Something that can diminish the suffering of someone, or keep someone from suffering, or give joy, give goodness or well-being. We could do something good for the environment, or something that could even change ourselves positively, face our negative habits, something that creates the positivity within, and then um, as a consequence is beneficial for others. Often there's this act of offering. When I do something positive, dedicated to the person who's died, the strength, um, the force that I have to do that positive action comes from the passing of that person. And so a part of that positive energy goes to that person. So in that moment, it's really it's fundamental to connect mentally and from heart to heart with that person. You can even talk to that being, follow the light. We're fine. Don't worry. We connect with a sense of gratitude and love and do positive things, generate positive energy, make offerings, help other people, plant trees. It's where we put emphasis into doing positive things. This is the most important thing that we can do. And then there's a specific practice that exists called Chanchuk. We've done it here a couple times. The essence of this practice is as follows. It's something that we can do for someone who's in the bardo, but it requires a certain amount of preparation. In this practice, what we do is we have an object that creates some kind of link with that person. Ideally, it's done on the actual body of the person, but if the body's not present, then one uses the photograph or a name, this commitment being that creates that connection. I'll just give you the summary. We invite the person from the bardo to come. We put him in front, and at that point, we do a practice of purification for that person, of offerings for that person. There's a part of teachings and directing where the person is generated in a pure state. If it was someone who had a specific spiritual practice, we accompany that person in that practice. It's happened to me, for example, once in Brazil. There was a boy who, just before dying, he wanted to take refuge. And it happened that, unfortunately, he died. It was a very strange death, probably caused by drugs, and anyway, that took away his mental clarity. I will to not get into the details of all this, but by just by chance, I got to Brazil the day after he died. I went to his funeral, and there in front of the body, one of the things I did was to give refuge to him. So I called him, we connected, and you can do many things. And this practice of Janchuk is purification. We help that person to generate positive energy and redirect it. This is the practice of Janchuk. Then it requires a certain preparation. But generally speaking, we should connect and generate positive energy that's dedicated to the person. And even talking to the person, saying, don't worry, be well, give positive energy. Imagine that you're in front of that person who's about to leave on a trip. We say you're fine, you'll be fine. Follow the light, follow what is virtuous. Any other specific question? Generally speaking, how can I say? we shouldn't intervene too much. If someone's dying, we leave them in peace. There are specific techniques, but they require a preparation. And there's a part of these techniques that have an external aspect, or where you can pull the hair a little bit towards the fontanella, try to pull out the consciousness, but that's just a small part of something that's much more complex. From my point of view, it's not that, someone's dying and that, you pull someone's hair, near the fontanella, it's not going to change that much. There are things that, generally speaking, it's better to touch the the upper part of the body, the hands, the the face, the head, more than the feet. But don't worry, don't worry. We don't have the such power. They say, "Oh, I touched his feet. What's going to happen?" Don't worry about that, please. The question is how to help. How can we help someone who is grieving, and is not able to overcome his grief? So first of all, the grieving process requires space and needs to be lived. There's, to help someone, it's important to understand that when we're in front of someone who is grieving, we can't solve the problem, but we can be part of the healing process of that person. So one thing to do is accept what's happened. One can see the pain, live it without refusing it. At the same time, let's remember that it takes time, and that time should be given. And at the same time, we should help that person, not just to be totally suffocated by this experience. So we should do that. Grief has a very strong energetic component, and so if that energy is completely, if that energy can be directed outward, and it can be very helpful. Some, for example, if the loss of someone very dear, maybe after a suicide or something, those who were suffering or grieving, they put the energy of grief into doing something positive for others. I think it's important to try to redirect that energy into something positive without trying to block or hide what's going on. Just in a few words, those are my thoughts.
Sì. Ok. Ok. La domanda è:
The question is, so bardo can't last more than 49 years, but there are mediums who can come into contact with people who died much earlier. In Brazil, we have many and actually in Tibet, they had many of people who had this ability. What happens is there are two possibilities here. Oh, that person was reborn in an extreme attachment to that previous life, as I said before, which is a minority of cases, or is something more particular, which the following. It's said that at the time of rebirth, at the time of death, two spirits are born together with us. These are subjects. Many of us are not ready to have this conversation, but it's said that together with us, we have a kind of entourage, but at least two who grow up with us. And as we go on in our life, they identify themselves with us. They develop together with us, and they nourish themselves with the identity of that person. And often these beings who so often these are the people that come into contact with these kinds of mediums, having grown up and lived with that person. They remember and they know everything. There are many descriptions. I mean, here in Tibet, this explanation was given. What happens is that we don't need to have many problems, but it's said that wherever there's space, there's life. Let's now talk about rebirth. The person is the being is in the bardo, and one is traveling freely in the bardo. At a certain point, the bardo beings is in front of the union of the future mother and father. And here there are different descriptions. Even ancient texts say that the being develops attraction towards the father or attraction for the mother, often attraction towards one and aversion towards the other. And if one has a strong attraction to the father, one is born as a female, and vice versa. If a strong attraction to the woman, he's born as a male. And there are techniques. For example, I read in an ancient text that talked about this. There are techniques that were used in ancient India in the royal families, for example, because there was this fixation of wanting male children. So the technique to have male children, it's said that during the sexual union, if the mother who has greater sexual desire, then the tendency is to have a boy. And instead, it's said that if the man is experiencing a greater level of sexual pleasure, the tendency is for a girl to be born. So one technique used is when a couple wanted to have a child, a boy, then in the relationship, in the union, so first, it was said that the man would satisfy himself first, having another relationship, another union, and then a union with the female. So she's full of desire. So I remember I remember a couple who really wanted a boy, and this couple used to just have girls that were as some children, and they would go to Lama Ganshin, and he would explain this and say, well, you've got to work on this. So depending on strength of the energy, the bardo being, depending on the attraction or aversion, is born. So the attraction that comes is not towards the person. Some say that the bardo being sees the future parents in union and has attraction towards the body. No, if you take the commentary of Goyasamadra, it's not like this. Attraction comes to the energy from the ovum and the sperm. It's something much more subtle than the body of the future father or mother, and that can explain also how in vitro fertilization it can happen, because the father and the mother are not physically there, but the attraction is not towards the figure of the mother or the father, but towards the energy of the mother or the father that is found in the essence, in the physical essence of the sperm or the ovum. When this happens in a normal way, like at the time of Buddha, this artificial insemination is, or in vitro fertilization is very new. But it's said that the bardo being, when he generates that desire, can enter from the central channel of the father at the neck, at the fontanella, or in the mouth, and then from the central channel and into the from the then the sperm of the father into the to the womb of the mother, and then is absolutely trapped. It's like a trap for the bardo being, with the union of the sperm and the ovum. The being is trapped there when the sperm and the ovum come into contact, and there's the death of the bardo being, and again there's the death and the death of the elements, and on the white, red, black vision and the clear light of the bardo, and the new birth starts from the opposite process. So from the clear light, then we go to the black near attainment, to the red increase, of the white vision, wind, fire, water, and earth. It's much it's much longer than the death process. So the being stays for a long time in the black near attainment, and then little by little the body starts developing, starting from the heart chakra, generating little by little the central channel from the indestructible drop, which is the first thing that is generate. So from the upper part of the spirit of the indestructible drop, the white bodhicitta is generated, and then the feminine energy from the lower part of the indestructible drop, the bodhicitta, the red bodhicitta, which is found throughout the body, but is developed mostly, principally the white bodhicitta at the crown and the red bodhicitta down at under the navel. So then the subtle body is created with the emotions, and then little by little the coarse body is generated, starting with the touch, and then the smell, the touch, and then taste and the smell. So it's in the process of rebirth is the opposite of death. So when at death we lost pleasure and pain, but it's one of the last to be generated during the rebirth process. Today, during during the break today, there's a text that explains all of this. It talks about all the whole process of the rebirth, what happens of the formation of the body and the inner experience. And these explanations, these are the, so even so Western medicine was very shocked to see these very ancient texts that come from like Tibetan medicine, and that is absolutely consistent with what actually happens. It's very detailed about the growth and the rebirth process. So it's a very gradual process. So what happened? Something important in the rebirth process. Do we have or not the freedom to choose where we want to be born? Yes, we do. We're free, but at the same time, we're free to choose what we choose now. If I were to place many objects here, and I say choose an object. Let's put the various objects. Let's put them here, and each person can choose an object. We have many different kinds of objects. Sometimes new things come, many different objects. And I say, come and choose something. You're free to choose what you want. There's no one here that says you can't take this or you can't take that. Does everyone choose the same thing? Someone who's thirsty would probably choose water. Someone who wants to practice Yamantaka will take the image of Yamantaka. Someone who likes plants would take the flowers. Someone who feels he's never listened to will take the microphone. So everyone takes something different according to one's own needs at the moment, or according to what one actually sees. Similarly, in the bardo, the bardo being is totally free to choose, but is absolutely conditioned by his own experiences, by that dream that he's living, the bardo that he's experiencing. So that's why one generates attraction and chooses to go, but within the conditionings that one has. So the only real freedom the only true freedom to choose would be choosing when we're free of ignorance. Theoretically, we're all free to choose, but we're not free from our own conditioning, our own karma. So what is Dharmakaya, etc., etc.? To give a precise answer, there's an interview that was done in the 1980s with the Kyabche Rinpoche. I think I can even send it to you. But in this interview, Tson Rinpoche talks about the difference between Yangtze and Tuku, these two Tibetan terms, and beyond the fact that those who are Yangtze are considered Tuku. So let's talk about the real meaning of these two words. There are people who who have a spiritual practice, have qualities, have disciples, etc., etc. People who have qualities that are reborn normally, and then they can be recognized. They're called Yangtze. Yangtze means reincarnation. And this, so we recognize the reincarnation of a master because someone, for example, who has inner qualities, special inner qualities, or who has practiced and studied his whole life, is born with predispositions, the positive predispositions. So recognizing the reincarnation as a child, we're able to wake up these predispositions. So Rinpoche was very direct, and he said that often we recognize the reincarnations of masters, but instead of helping them, we hurt them. So instead of creating the conditions for them to develop, we place him on a throne full of brocade, and we keep him from being able to develop. And he was very direct. And then Shinktu Koko in Tibetan, there are phenomena that we can perceive through our sensitive, and there are phenomena that we can understand through reasoning, and then there are phenomena that we can't even understand through reasoning. Chepche Tson Rinpoche said that there are also tuku. It's an avatar in Sanskrit. Tuku is Tibetan. Tuku are beings who have totally gone out of samsara. They don't have ignorance or attachment. They have gotten out of samsara. They choose where to be born to help others, and it's said that they have abilities to manifest in more than one bodies. And Kyabse Dzong Rinpoche, he gave this example. He said, my master, one day he was there, and he was there with his attendant. He was laughing very, very hard, and his attendant said, but master, what is it? No, don't worry. No, nothing. After a while, he insisted. He said, okay, you know what it is? There's another one of my emanations who is in China, and he's a beggar. He's a beggar, the two beggars, and after so much effort, they finally got some good food, and then some street dogs stole the food. And then the attendant said, well, how many emanations do you have? And he said, I don't know, I need to meditate on that, and then I'll tell you. He said, and the next day, he said, I was able to recognize about 200 emanations. What does that mean on a technical level? What does it mean? I don't know. And if you try to understand, you won't be able to understand, because it would be just a projection of our own mind. But it's said that a being who has a certain level of wisdom has a very high level of multitasking and can emanate his own essence in more than one body, in more than one body. But there's a very important point here. This is my own understanding. Even a being, even a fully realized being, once he takes a coarse body, he follows the natural process of a coarse gross body, even with a gross mind. So Rinpoche Lama Ganchen, for example, when in the 1960s, when he was in India, there was a moment, a special moment, where he wasn't well. He had just left Tibet. It was hard for him to find food. He could eat only once a day. He didn't have a clear a clear idea of his future. He was studying Sanskrit in Varanasi, and he wasn't passionate about it. At a certain point, he went to find his master, Trijang Rinpoche, and he said, with all my respect, I think you've made a mistake, because you said that I'm the reincarnation of this great master, Kachin Tsapin La. I mean, if it's so, then why am I in such a bad state? If I am such a special being, why am I not in a pure land enjoying myself instead of being in this very difficult situation? And here Trijang Rinpoche said to him, a tulku, when is reborn, his deep qualities are like seeds. They're imprints that he takes with them in his mind stream. And as long as the conditions aren't created for those seeds to germinate, so that those imprints, those seeds can manifest. If you can put two children together, one tulku and one not, they might seem the same. It means that those qualities at birth, they come as imprints, as predispositions, and then it'll depend on the process, the conditions that are created in life to see if those predispositions will manifest or not. Sometimes there are seeds that just don't germinate. So here again, why should we a certain type of education experience? It's to germinate those seeds. And when he told me this, I said, for thank goodness that everything germinated, everything flowered. Because I say this because because the process of rebirth needs to follow the process of the growth of a gross mind. Otherwise, if it weren't like this, then one, after death, one is reborn, and one has all the memory and everything from before. No, even a very realized being, when a realized being dies, the very subtle mind and body continues, but the gross mind and body and the subtle mind and body dissolve. What happens is one can be protected on many levels from one's own spiritual guide. There's an energetic connection that naturally protects you on many different levels. That's why I said before, these are things that personally I've never tried to understand too much, also because I don't think that I have all the resources to understand them within the world that I live in. I mean, these are things that go beyond. This is a little bit about the process of rebirth, but it's important just to close this argument. When a tulku, and we're not talking about Yangtze, we're talking about a profoundly realized being. There's the whole the process of development, and there's also the cultural context, the experiences. It's absolutely normal. Now, we've seen briefly the process of death, the bardo process, and the rebirth. Is it clear enough? When we sleep, this process of falling asleep is extremely similar to the death process. Dreams are extremely similar to the bardo, and the waking up is very similar to rebirth. Even when we wake up, what's the last sense to be activated? When you wake up slowly, there's that lazy wake up. Among the five senses, what's the first sense that one gains? For me, it's somewhere between the touch and taste. I have that taste of sleep in my mouth, and then one starts to feel, to move one's body, and then one can hear a smell or far away sounds that become closer and closer, and then one opens one's eyes and can see something. And if you still can't, a little bit of splashing water on your face. So just to leave a seed here without explaining too much. In the Vajrayana Buddhism, the objective is to come into contact with the clear light and transform one's mind in a virtuous state, generate a great state of wisdom and joy, to come into contact with this clear light, as I explained before. And to do this, we need to train. We need to train during our life. And here we can talk about the 9 mixings. It's really quite simple to understand this concept, generally speaking. The first mixing, I mix death, the clear light of death of meditation, with the Dharmakaya, the very subtle mind and body in a pure state. So in meditation, I simulate the process of death. I imagine the state of clear light, and in that state of clear light, I identify myself where I transform death into Dharmakaya. In meditation, I mix the bardo of meditation with the Sambhogakaya, the subtle body of the subtle mind in a pure state. So I imagine that from death I arise in a pure subtle body, and then in meditation I mix the rebirth of meditation with the Nirmanakaya, which is the tulku. This emanation body is tulku, is also Nirmanakaya, as his body of emanation. It's said that a Buddha, just a side note, that a Buddha can emanate himself in many different ways. That an enlightened being can emanate himself in wind, in a tree, in an object, in many different ways. The excellent emanations, the best emanations, is when it's a physical being, a human body that we can connect with. But it's said that a tulku can materialize himself in many different things. This is also part of the Shinto Korgo that goes beyond our logical understanding. So we can mix the rebirth of meditation with the Nirmanakaya. So I imagine being rebirth. I imagine a pure rebirth. These are the first 3 mixings. When one is able to meditate well on the death process and transform death in Dharmakaya, in meditation, transform death, the Dharmakaya into Sambhogakaya, and then Sambhogakaya in Nirmanakaya. When you're able to do that well, then there's the second level of training, which are the next 3 mixings, where one's able to mix the clear light of sleep with Dharmakaya. So one physically, as one falls asleep with awareness of the process of sleep, one uses the actual clear light of falling asleep to generate the Dharmakaya. One uses the dream to mix with the Sambhogakaya and the waking up to as waking up. So one prepares oneself with this process of falling asleep, dreaming, and waking up. Is a way to train in dying, bardo, and rebirth. When you're able to do it well, then one is able to do the next 3 mixings. So it's mixing the Dharmakaya of the actual death with the actual to mix the clear light of actual death with the Dharmakaya, and actual bardo with the Sambhogakaya, and the actual rebirth and the Nirmanakaya. It's the essence of Vajrayana and how to prepare for death and use it as a tool for spiritual practice and growth. When we look at it more closely, we see it's something possible, because if I'm able to transform death at least 4 times a day, I'm able to do it, and then that's why there are 4 sessions a day. 4 times a day, I do this meditation. And then beyond that, I'm able to integrate that every time I fall asleep, I'm able to recognize that process of falling asleep, and I can transform that falling asleep. That gives us a real credible the possibility of being able to do it at the time of death. But to do it well at death requires a lot of it's a full-time job. It's a full-time job that requires a tremendous amount of work in lifetime. For example, one of my masters in Tibet, he was one of the main monasteries of the Tantric College of Tashi Lumpo. So when he sleeps, he never lies down. I was in his room receiving teachings. He doesn't have a bed, just a meditation seat, and to sleep, he would sleep with the dissolution of the elements. And when he wakes up in the morning, he wakes up with the generation of the self-generation of the divinity. There are those who train in this their entire lives. Good news is, it's number one, it's possible. But I think that most of us, unfortunately, we don't have the conditions or the preparation to do it on this level. Or, am I right? We don't. You need a tremendous amount of predisposition and merits to be able to do this. Even in the monastery like Tashi Lumpo, the people that I knew like this, I knew one person who was like this, and out of the 800 who were there. So it doesn't mean that there weren't others that were doing it, but clearly I met only one. So what happens is, even if, number one, it's possible, but even if it seems unreachable for most of us, anyway, there are so many things that are reachable that we can do. We can start right away that can ensure a good death and a good rebirth. So one thing is using a death to reach enlightenment. Another thing is to prepare oneself to die well and to ensure a positive continuation. And we can all do this, and it's already so much. So it means it means awareness of our own mortality, the 5 powers, being at peace with our own past, to practice Guru Yoga in our life, practice Poa at the time of death. These are all the tools that we've shared in these last 2 days. We have access to these tools and they're possible. We need to just put them into practice. One last thing, just as a just to touch on it in the practice, like self-healing, for example. So transforming death into Dharmakaya is or also this training of seeing one's own death and inducing the death process and inducing the Dharmakaya, and even towards the end, there's the part of the absorption of the winds in the central channel, which is part of this training. Those of you who know self-healing well, maybe you're able to connect the dots a little bit. First of all, during the part of the 5 Dhyani Buddhas called the vase empowerment of the 5 Dhyani Buddhas, we generate an identity on a course level of the 5 Dhyani Buddhas. After this, we have Om Mani Padme Hum. Om Mani Padme Hum, that first part from above, below, white, and then from below up, red. And then we have Mahasukha that unites at the heart, and then there's the Om Vishwa Shanti. What we meditate on inside during the practice is first Om Mani Padme Hum is the white bodhicitta that descends. The second one is the red bodhicitta that ascends, and the Om Mahasukha is where everything absorbs. At the heart is the black near attainment, and the Om Vishwa Shanti is the clear light. It's the exact same process, and to be precise, the only difference in self-healing, like in all practices of self initiation, like all of the highest yoga practice of Anuttara Yoga Tantra, to be precise, even if it is like a training for death, actually it's not a training for death. It's a training to generate the clear light of actual meditation, because what one is doing is entering into a process of dissolution to bring the winds within the central channel, to allow oneself to take away all the distractions, external distractions, and through the absorption of the winds in the central channel at the heart, we generate a more subtle state of consciousness, and on that state to meditate on love and wisdom. It's that moment of Om Vishwa Shanti that represents the clear light. And this is also, it's also can be a training for death, but that's a specific function. But knowing the death process, this helps us understand the meditation practices within the highest yoga tantra of the Vajrayana Buddhism. So as we've explained in these days, the reason why we've explained them is to be able to meditate well, in a correct and deep way. First, we need this awareness. We need this awareness and understanding of the death process, the bardo process, and the rebirth process. But in these 2 days, I wanted to put emphasis on that first part, because in my opinion, if we were talking about things that are too evolved, then maybe it seems too far away, and we can think that we'll never manage, and then we can lose sight of what we can actually do today if we spend our time talking about the far away objectives. So one more time, this awareness of death, these 4 questions. After which, the 5 powers. relate well to material things, have an identity that transcends this body, have clarity of what I don't want to take with me, have clarity of what I do want to take with me, and have a desire that transcends this life. Then these practices of purification to be at peace with our own past. We're able to see ourselves, accept ourselves with love, look towards our past, and be at peace with it. Next, we generate an inner refuge, a place of inner refuge where we can generate a deep state of joy, peace, and love. We cultivate this inner state and we train in inducing this state, this inner state. And one method to do that is the Guru Yoga. Once the Guru Yoga is done well, and then in the terminal, before death, we practice the POA, where we invert, instead of the Guru entering into our heart, we go towards the Guru. These are practices that everyone can do. Once you do them, they're doable. But if you keep them as an idea or just as something conceptual, then if one doesn't apply it, if one doesn't ask oneself, am I going to die? And doesn't allow that deep feeling of yes, I'm going to die. It's almost, when you really feel it, it's almost like you want to explain it to others, like you've discovered something, even though that seems so absurd, but it's like this. When I had that experience, that non-conceptual experience of the uncertainty of death with that anaphylactic shock, I wanted to talk about it. I wanted to tell people. It really moved something within me. So let's allow ourselves to really do it. When we're meditating on the Guru Yoga, let's allow ourselves to feel that and connect. When I asked Lama Michel Rinpoche, and there's just one thing I wanted to share. When I asked Lama Michel Rinpoche, when you will no longer be physically present in this body, what do you want us to do with your body? Do you want to be cremated? And once he answered, I'd like my body to stay intact, because this body received so many blessings that it will continue to emanate that energy. My new body, if my body will ever take all those blessings, it will take a long time. So the body itself has this potential to emanate energy, and so his body is intact. Do you want us to make many small stupas? No, not that many, because people today don't understand stupas. Make statues. But how do you want the statues to be done? Traditionally, as like a pandita with a yellow cap, or as a mahasiddha. These are two classic the images. He said, no. He said, just as I am. This means that we need to connect with what touches our heart. When the Guru touches our heart, this aspect as he is, that's the one we need to connect with. And we're working on the statues. Little by little, they'll come up. I've already made 3 models I wasn't happy with. The 4th seems better. So this is something important. We need to touch. We need to connect with what touches our heart, because we need to feel it. It's not just imagining in the form of Buddhas. No, that passion, that desire of being together, that desire. it's a real passion that we need to cultivate. One last thing that that came to my mind that I wanted to share. When we talked about someone dying and then there's signs to understand if the person died well or not. Similarly, it's also described the signs of when a being, a realized being, leaves his body. And among these signs, this one is called the rain of flowers. I've seen that happen once. I was here. There was Rinpoche together with, if I think we were with Nima Tulko. We were walking around the temple. At a certain point, there were just all the petals of flowers that were following. It 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 was around May. It was the late May, early June, and there were all these white petals that were coming down from the sky. It seemed absolutely magical. It was a personal experience, but it's said that one of the most important experiences when an important master leaves his body are the rainbows, and those you remember that when Lama Ganchen Rinpoche left his body, there's that image in the museum as a photo that I took. There were it was a rainbow that that was that lasted for days, and I received photographs from all over, from Greece to Holland to and actually it ended up in the newspaper with some kind of scientific explanation as to how it was possible for there to be such a rainbow. But this is a sign of great auspiciousness when there's this manifestation of the one's very subtle body and mind. Just to say that the death is not something so negative. Of course, when there's someone that we love, like a friend. Like a friend of Rinpoche called me after Rinpoche left his body, and he said that, of course, it wouldn't matter. No matter how many years Rinpoche lived, it would have never been enough for us. So, but if we allow ourselves, there are the blessings. There are many, many positive aspects within this process. So it's clear that there's sadness when there's someone close to us is no longer there. There's the missing of that person. I mean, but one thing doesn't take away the other. But really, in these 2 days, I wanted to try to put energy into changing this dynamic that we live in, so that when we imagine our own death, it shouldn't be imagining something negative. It's possible that one's own death is from the inside is something very beautiful. It doesn't have to be something negative. Obviously, to go in that direction, we need to prepare. Forgive me if I just so repetitive, but it's so important, and we're so used to living as if we didn't have to die. But so I need to repeat this again and again and again. We have this enormous luck, we have this enormous good fortune to have these tools, and now it's up to each one of us and the best of our abilities to put it all into practice. I'd like to make a request to each one of you. If you somehow on any level have felt some kind of benefit, something if you've heard something that makes sense, make it your own. Let it not remain as Lama said. Let it become your own and incorporated into your life. You can even forget who told you. There are no copyrights here. What's important is integrating it into your own life and use it, and little by little remembering it and taking those first steps, writing it down, and ask those 4 questions well. The rest will come. So really, let's try to not let life go by as if it didn't exist. Let's remember that the most precious resource that we have in life is life itself, and should be lived at its best. And one needs courage for that. It's not obvious. One needs courage to live with the awareness of our mortality. Let's remember, it's never too late and it's never too early. We can do it, but we do it respecting the length of our own legs. The example from yesterday, for example, it's when we look at the road, the most important thing is to take that first step, one step after the other, and then it comes. But don't be in a hurry to get there, but be in a hurry to start walking. Okay, I thank you. I thank you also giving me the opportunity to pick up these subjects again that are very important for me. It's time for our dedications.
Tramare rabali te ulvar drokun nam da shingla chöpar shoy jetsulame kotseraptem Chinam kartingle chochurgepat lo santempe drome sasum kim drove amun seltaktu Negyur Chiyedam Guru Ratna Mindrala Kamniryataya Kyewa Kundu Yanda Lama Dan Rame Cheki Pela Longche Chin Sadan Lamge Yönder Changi Kopa Nyurtop Sho Nimo Dele Tsendele Nime Kuyan Delek Shin Ninsen Takto Delek Pe Kuncho Sumki Chingilo Kuncho Sumki Ngodrubut Sol Kuncho Sumki Trashisho.
At dawn or at dusk, at night or midday, may the three jewels grant us their blessings. May they help us to achieve all realizations and sprinkle the path of our lives with various signs of auspiciousness.
At dawn or dusk, at night or midday, may the three jewels grant us their blessings. May they help us to achieve all realizations and sprinkle all the path of our lives with various signs of auspiciousness. Grazie a tutti. Ci vediamo domani mattina.